Hey guys, today I'm out in rainy Washington taking a look at one of the least likely vehicles for me to be driving in the wet weather. It is of course the 691 horsepower McLaren Artura. This is a hybrid supercar with a hybrid system that has a very different mission in mind than say a Toyota Prius. So if you're thinking Prius or Prius Prime or even something like a BMW plug-in hybrid, when we're talking about the Artura, throw that concept of plug-in hybridization out the window, because this hybrid system actually has a lot more in common thematically with what we find in the next generation of e-performance hybrids from the AMG brand from Mercedes. Let's dive in, let's take a look at this model and talk about why you really want a plug-in hybrid in your next supercar. The first thing we should do, of course, is dive into the design of the Artura. This, of course, is the Artura Spider, so it's the convertible version. Up front, though, it looks exactly like the coupe version. Really incredibly low front end, real cab forward proportions here. Just check out how low this front end is. It's actually below my knees here. That's how low the front end is. And of course, it hides within it a front trunk because the engine is in the back. So if we're talking about storage, let's take a look at that up front. Under here, we find the front trunk storage area, sort of Porsche 911-like, of course. And like that 911, it's a really deep storage well. So you can put maybe a 24-inch roller bag in there, some soft luggage on top, but that is about it when it comes to actual storage. Up front, we also have a forward view camera because this is actually a pretty tech-heavy supercar. Remember that a lot of supercars out there seem a little bit backwards sometimes, if I'm honest, when it comes to tech and some of the gadgets that you find on board. Definitely not regular luxury manufacturer, but I think the McLaren marches to a slightly different drummer there. As we move around to the side, of course, no supercar would be complete without awesome proportions, and we find those in this vehicle. The windshield's base actually is in front of the front axle. That's what really gives this that distinctive look. Lots of carbon fiber going on. Massive air ducts, of course, here right behind the doors. And of course, the doors, they are a scissor lift style door, so obviously pretty cool there. And in the back, just check out this design. On the cover for the power hardtop, we find these really distinctive glass buttresses. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but if you come in close here, you can actually see that this is a clear glass buttress design right there that helps smooth out the airflow along the back and of course really gives it this very distinctive look. In the rear, that is where we find the engine and the hybrid system. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. Like we've seen in some other McLarens, we have metal grating right here around the exhaust and some air intakes and air ducting right there. It's a hugely distinctive design with these twin exhaust tips in the back. This is on actually, because this is of course a plug-in hybrid system giving you about 20 miles of all electric range at speeds of around 80 miles an hour maximum. So this is the kind of vehicle where you can have your supercar, but you can also save a little bit of gas if you want to. Not necessarily for emissions, although logically that would be one reason to get this, but also because you don't have to take your supercar to the gas station as often if you want to daily drive something like this, and you want to save a little bit of stress on the twin-turbo V6 under the hood or just a little bit of wear and tear. Now let's check out the hardtop. It is a single-piece hardtop with a glass moonroof. That's kind of a cool touch. I can't think of too many hardtops that have a glass moonroof, and I can't think of another one that offers an electrochromatic dimming moonroof, so you can actually dim it if you don't want so much light coming through. It goes right back here into this section beneath this panel, and under here we have an access panel for some of the drivetrain components. That's also where you find fluid reservoirs, etc. right back there. But we don't have a traditional hood or engine compartment that opens in the back. I guess you'd still call it a hood, even though this is a rear engine supercar. Well, we're talking about the hardtop. We have some interesting buttons over here on the driver's side door bottom. So when the doors open, you can power open the tonneau cover back here for easier access to some of those components. Over there on that side of the sort of engine bay, one of the reasons you might want to do that is because this is actually where we put engine oil into the system. Kind of an interesting place for that little filler neck, but it does make sense because, again, there's no traditional hood back there. Now let's talk about what's going on under the covers here. We have a 3-liter twin-turbo V6 and a 94 horsepower electric motor. Everything together gives you 691 horsepower in North America. If you measure horsepower the way they do in Britain, it comes in at 700 horsepower, which makes a bit more sense when you think of some of the directions and naming schemes that we find in the McLaren lineup. What's cool about this hybrid system is that it's a performance-oriented hybrid system. So this Spider weighs just about 3,400 pounds. It's only about 130 pounds heavier than the coupe version because logically, in a supercar, we have lots of high-tech, lightweight materials making up the vehicle, including lots of carbon fiber, lots of aluminum components, etc., and then a real focus on lightweighting for the plug-in hybrid system. This hybrid battery pack has a nominal capacity of around 7.4 kilowatt hours or so, but it's using that battery in a very different way from the average hybrid or the average plug-in hybrid, because it's used to improve performance in the Artura, not just give you that all-electric range. In fact, depending on how you want to look at it, you could almost see that all-electric range as kind of a nice-to-have addition to the feature set of the prime mission of the electric system. In this vehicle, the main reason for the electric motor is to improve performance. We get a lot of low-end torque out of an electric motor, and you have the ability to improve torque during times where maybe the turbos aren't spooled up, or perhaps torque fill between gear changes, etc. So you can smooth out the operation, and of course, you can get just more power. That's how we get nearly 700 horsepower in North America out of a 3-liter twin-turbo 6. And absolutely insane 0 to 60 times, which unfortunately, because of the rain, I cannot demonstrate for you, but you should be able to go 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds. The charge door, that's right back here. Of course, the car is locked, so let me go ahead and unlock it. We have a J1772 charging connector, no DC fast charging, which is pretty logical given the relative size of the battery and, again, the mission of the battery. Another interesting twist with this plug-in hybrid system is that it doesn't do throttle lift-off regen. So when you're coasting down the road, you get true coasting because they weren't trying to maximize efficiency. Again, they're trying to maximize performance. You also don't get a blended braking system. When you're hitting your foot on the brake pedal, you get the regular McLaren carbon ceramic friction brakes. Now let's take a look on the inside. Starting out here with the driver's seat, obviously getting in and out of the vehicle could be a little bit tricky depending on whether or not you have mobility issues because the sills are pretty high. This is an all carbon fiber vehicle, and one of the reasons they were able to chop the top off so easily here is because of how rigid the structure is on the regular coupe. There is just so much rigidity in this structure. We'll go ahead and start it up and open the top again here so you can see it. In terms of front seat comfort, we do have electrically adjustable seats, which is a nice touch, and not something that we find in every high-performance vehicle out there, because a lot of manufacturers are really concerned about lightweighting. Again, given the structure of the vehicle, it was relatively easy for them to cut the top off because this structure is so rigid thanks to the carbon fiber body that we find. That's part of why we find that big sill right there. You're definitely sitting low in this, but if I close the roof, you'll notice headroom is pretty generous, and that's because some of the designers at McLaren are actually relatively tall, and they wanted to be able to sit in here and still wear a helmet. We can actually undim this moonroof so you can see the brighter and dimmer proportions, but I have maybe about 2 inches or so of headroom left. This seat is all the way down, and if you want, you could recline it actually even further, really getting that sort of bucket style laid back sitting position, and then you get a little bit more headroom if you want to wear a helmet. Speaking of this electrochromatic dimming roof, come in close for this. It actually changes pretty quickly, kind of like we find on Airbus airplanes and of course the 787 as well with that electrochromatic dimming feature. That's a really cool touch. Now let's check out the rest of the interior. This model has the optional Bowers & Wilkins audio system, so there are a number of speaker grills around the vehicle that you don't find in the base model. Fixed in place headrests there. I love the way this cabin looks, and I love the attention to detail and the materials quality as well. You can really tell that they spent a lot of time on every aspect of this interior, including the areas that you don't normally see very often. So even though we have a really lightweight, really thin front seat design, they're pretty comfortable, and even the back is nicely done with stitching that wraps all the way around to the sort of piano black section in the rear. We have pretty aggressive bolstering, just as you'd expect in a McLaren, on the seat back and on the seat bottom cushion. Lots and lots of premium materials going on the front doors. So we have a fully stitched door panel there. The only areas that don't feature stitched leather are the parts in the middle that feature that Alcantara fabric or the metal accents or the sort of chromed accent strip that circles that door all the way around there. You can see a door pocket right there up front. Keep in mind, of course, the way the door opens, so you can't keep too much in there as it might spill out when you open the door. Up here we have the Bowers & Wilkins speaker grills there, an Alcantara covered dashboard. That's a really elegant design. Lots of piano black as well. I'm a little bit concerned about how that might scratch longer term there. The Bowers & Wilkins center channel speaker right up top there. In the middle of everything, we have a relatively small infotainment display. I do kind of wish that we had a bigger display, especially given its position in this cabin. I think they could have supported something that was maybe 11 or 12 inches. Instead, we have an approximately 8-inch screen here. It's running a version of the Android operating system. It does support Apple CarPlay, but interestingly, not Android Auto. We have native navigation built into the system right there, just as you'd expect, although it's not running the usual Google mapping interface. This appears to be a different kind of navigation database in the system. As far as responsiveness goes, I think the system actually could be a little bit better. Sometimes it doesn't quite respond to finger presses, and you do have to get things in exactly the right spot to pull up things like the climate control menu. There's a control knob over here on the side that gets us to the home menu. It also adjusts things like the volume, etc. That's kind of an interesting design touch. And I do like the way that it sort of floats in the dashboard. It's a very, very distinctive look. Underneath that, we have a little storage compartment there. You can put your smartphone in there. Then we have the engine start, stop button, drive, neutral, and reverse. There's no specific park option, so for park, you just put it in neutral, turn the car off, and the electric parking brake activates. We have a single cup holder there, and then we have a teeny tiny little storage compartment right here with USB inputs. That's where we're going to plug in for the Apple CarPlay functionality. It's a really thin armrest because, again, the interior is relatively narrow because of the size of the vehicle. It's, of course, a supercar. It's meant to be tight and meant to be really sporty. Moving over here to the driver's side, we have a full-color LCD instrument cluster, and it moves with the steering column. So you can see it actually pulls in and out there. Definitely a very distinctive look, but also it really highlights some of the attention to detail. So if I go in here, you'll see this entire panel is wrapped in Alcantara, including the bottom, including the dashboard. Really nice seaming there. We have some controls on the instrument cluster binnacle that moves as well. So over here, we have basically the drive mode selector, comfort, sport, and electric. We have manual mode right there. And then over here, we have an adjustment for the suspension. So comfort and sport and track over there for the various different suspension modes. Electronic stability control disable button is part of that as well. Big shift paddles right here. They do move with the steering wheel, which is something I appreciate, but not something that we find in every supercar. And then lots of stalks on the back. Over here we have our turn signal stalk, of course, and our high beams. Then we have a stalk that actually controls the multifunction instrument cluster right up there. So this is how we move through options in that instrument cluster, and then you select them and cancel them by pulling that in and out. There's a voice command button at the end. Then there's a tiny little stalk for adjusting that electric steering column. Over here we have the windshield wiper controls and then the cruise control controls on that stalk right there. So lots and lots of stalks on the back of the steering wheel. On this side we have some extra controls for the front trunk, the lane keeping system or the lane departure monitoring system there, the electronic lifting suspension up front. This does not have a hydraulic suspension. This has more of a traditional adaptive style steel spring suspension, and then we have the headlight control right over there. Before we get this out on the road, let's talk about the wheels, tires, and of course the brakes and suspension as well, because they're all key to this going 0 to 60 in 3 seconds flat and road holding at over a G. We have really sticky tires here, of course. These are Pirelli P0 Corsa tires, staggered tire setup, 235, 35 R19s up front, 295 tires in the back, so nice and meaty in the rear. Of course, we have McLaren's carbon ceramic brake package on this model as well, but check out the size of that brake rotor. That is absolutely enormous, as are the brakes themselves, and I really like the cool wheel design. If we move to the back, again, really meaty tires back here. These are 295 35 ZR20s, so not only do we have a staggered tire setup, we have bigger diameter wheels and tires in the back than we find up front. That's part of what gives this that absolutely iconic look, that supercar vibe in the rear. Then we have a pretty traditional steel spring suspension back, so not a cross-linked hydraulic suspension like we've seen in other McLaren models. Instead, they went in a slightly more traditional direction. Of course, it has adaptive dampers as well. And as we find in many supercars, we still have a lift up front. So this actually is in its lifted position, just in case you're wondering. So if you're worried about parking lot maneuvers and striking that incredibly low front end when you're entering or exiting a parking lot, we do have that ability to lift the front. Let's go ahead and check that out. Here we are in the regular height mode, and then here we are in the lifted height mode. As you can see, it operates relatively rapidly, but you do need to plan ahead for some of those parking lot exits. All right, let's get the Spider out on the road. Let's hope the rain doesn't wash this itsy bitsy Spider down, of course. But you know, I was surprised when I first got this on the road how aggressive it is in electric mode. It's staying in electric mode.
Yeah, I was shocked at first when we were driving. I was like, wait a second, there's something missing from this supercar. And it was the noise. And I was like, looking over, and oh, it's still an electric. You can see in the bottom right corner, but you said we chewed through quite a bit of battery, right?
Yeah, we chewed through about half the battery so far. We did start with it completely full because it charged overnight, but it does seem like, you know, you could easily get about 15 miles electric only. It's definitely enough to get to the grocery store and back, or if you have a relatively short commute, something like that.
Yeah, or sneaking home late at night.
Yeah, sneaking home late at night. I don't know why you would need to do that. I guess if you're out with your mistress or something.
Yeah, exactly. Your work wife.
You know, you're not letting your kid drive this thing. I mean, I guess if you have a lot of money and a lot of cars, maybe your kid does drive it, I don't know.
Yeah, or annoying neighbors.
That's true. But talk about drive modes here for a bit. So when I say that there is no throttle liftoff regen, that's of course in the higher performance modes, because in electric, we actually get pretty aggressive braking here. So foot off the brake pedal, we're coming down. Let's see if it actually takes us to a complete stop in the electric only mode. We do have multiple drive modes and multiple ways to control the suspension. So right now we're in electric and we're in comfort. So it doesn't take you to a stop, it just sort of continues rolling along slowly here, it just ends the electric assist. And if there's no hill, then yeah, we eventually come to a complete stop like that. Engagement is, you know, sometimes there are some rough moments with the way the transmission is designed. This is not a traditional automatic transmission, so of course it's not going to be that kind of smooth. Let's move it over to the comfort drive mode, because this is a blend of electric operation here and there, and then of course that 3-liter twin turbo.
Yeah, this car is a hit. These kids are pulling their phones out, and we're going through a school zone right now, and I bet you're going to talk about that all day. But yeah, it feels pretty good in here. It's smooth. It's very smooth, really.
They could also be pulling out their phones because they're like, oh my god, why do those people have their top open?
Yeah, or cameras in their face, whatever it may be.
Something like that, you know. Who knows what's going on. The engine's pretty well civilized, but you know, even in this mode, the throttle is not as aggressive as you might think, because it's the comfort drive mode.
Yep.
Wind noise pretty well controlled, of course, with this hard top. Let's toggle the drive mode up to sport. Definitely more aggressive. And then we'll go up to track. And here in track mode is where you really don't get much throttle liftoff regen at all. The display says we're getting a little bit, but I don't feel it. It just basically feels like a traditional supercar.
Now, does track mode, does it turn off stability control? And
according to this, it does not, but you can do that with this little stability control off button. There is a reasonable amount of adjustability here. You can also go in here to turn on the dynamic modes there in the touchscreen infotainment system. It also does not adjust the suspension, so we can be in track mode or sport mode with the comfort suspension, which I do kind of like, because if we move over to track for the suspension, this gets pretty firm.
Yeah, immediately. You can feel a lot more vibrations, a lot more pebbles underneath the tires.
And definitely that bounce, you know, that you get in so many supercars there.
Yep. And like we mentioned in previous videos out here in this part of Washington, I'm very surprised how well kept these roads are.
Yeah.
The roads are very smooth. There's not a lot of patching going on. But we are in a little bit of a rural area compared to where we started, and it is getting a little bit rougher. So it's nice to kind of test out the suspension in this sport mode. And you're in sport suspension right now. Comfort.
I was in track. Let's move back to comfort. Comfort, I think, is better for these roads. You know, I would really reserve track just for actual track duty. I don't think I would drive around daily like that.
No.
Let's check out the top operation here. So we can actually operate the top here at 30 miles an hour. That is definitely pretty handy. So if it did start to rain, you don't have to wait too long. And that's actually pretty quick top, all things considered too.
Yeah.
I really, though, what do you think about this? I really love this tintable glass thing.
It's pretty cool. And like you mentioned, it is similar to like what they have in the airplanes. And it's such an interesting technology. And you definitely have more of an engineering mind. So how does that actually work? What is it changing to change the darkness or the tint of the actual glass or plastic?
It's actually like a big liquid crystal display like we find in phones or cameras, camera displays, etc. So basically there are crystals inside a matrix between the glass panels, and when you apply a voltage to them, they change their orientation. So they can either align to block sunlight out, or they can disperse to be clear. So it's kind of a really cool technology the way that works.
That is really cool. That's very nice to have. I've been in cars with large moonroofs, and when they don't have any sort of tint or something of this nature, that sun comes through and is brutal. And it would definitely be brutal because your head is very close to this, so it would be hot and, and bright if you did not have this. Pretty cool technology.
So now we are in the sport mode, and we should talk about some of the numbers. So again, 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, according to most reports. Keep in mind that if you want to go faster than that, it's probably possible, but you'd need track slicks, etc., because it's really traction limited in a vehicle like this with this much power. And of course, it's been raining, so we are absolutely not going to be doing 0 to 60 runs in this, or really testing the limits of the handling. But according to outlets that do have access to a skid pad, you can expect decently over 1G in this McLaren, because the weight is really low in the vehicle. Of course, we have those absolutely ridiculously aggressive tires as well.
Yeah.
But for me, it's more the feel of this. Even though this does have an electric assisted rack, we actually get some feel out of the steering wheel. I can feel the road through the wheel. I can actually get feedback, see exactly what's going on. And it has a very particular McLaren feel to it. It's not light steering, but you do get feedback. In some ways, this may sound bad to some people, but it's kind of like the Mazda of steering racks in the performance segment. So if we're talking about Mazda that our viewers are maybe more familiar with, you certainly get more feel from the front than in a Chevy or a Toyota or a Honda. Yeah. That's exactly the same here versus some of the other performance cars out there. A Mercedes GT, which is in the same price range as the low-end versions of the McLaren lineup. You can get your Mercedes GT up to over $200,000. There's definitely a big feel to them. They feel big, they feel heavy, they feel numb. That's not how this feels at all. There's definitely a liveliness to the steering.
Yeah, I've never been behind the wheel of a McLaren before, but everything I have heard from videos I've watched, it seems like they're composed when you need them to be, but if you want a raw experience, they can give that to you as well. So I'm interested to see how that actually feels, because being in the driver's seat is a whole different experience than being in the passenger seat. But over here, it feels really smooth, feels very mature, like composed, but it feels like it wants to go and wants to unleash all of the power.
Potential owners should be aware that depending on your mobility, you may be able to get in, you may not be able to get out.
Yeah, the getting out's the hard part. You can just kind of fall in.
I like the fact that, on the driver's side, it definitely feels different from this side. You definitely feel in the cockpit.
Yeah.
But on the passenger side, it actually feels pretty airy and pretty comfortable. A lot of supercars have such tight footwells. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say that footwell's a little on the tight side for my size 11s. The brake pedal, you definitely feel your feet rubbing on things. And over here on the passenger side, it's a little bit tight as well. But I will say that from an airiness perspective on the passenger side, like this dashboard's really nice and low. You get really good visibility out of there. And this feels more futuristic luxury car in some ways than performance car on the passenger side, except for the seat. The seat is really lightweight. It is pretty adjustable. I was surprised, but it's not obviously going to be the most luxurious, cushy seat.
Yeah, now as I mentioned, completely different experience being a passenger versus driver. Immediately a different experience. Like it's a whole different car in my thought process now, because you feel the road in the steering wheel.
Yeah.
Which is not what I expected, but it feels nice because the steering wheel itself is fairly thin, which I like. I don't necessarily like
not
those
not a big
bulky
wheel fan.
No, there's some vehicles that I've driven recently where it's just too bulky. It's too. You lose so much feel of the vehicle through the actual padding or the heating elements.
That's
this
true.
is very raw. This feels like I can feel the structure of the steering wheel, but not in a bad way. And it feels like very
the
heavy.
steering is very direct. Now let's switch you over to the electric mode. I'm going to go ahead and play with your buttons because I'm that kind of person. So pushing people's buttons, that's how it goes. So now we're in the electric mode. What do you think? I actually kind of am totally
smooth.
Fine with the electric mode.
Yeah, that was really smooth. If you're not driving this to get that supercar experience, the electric mode is fantastic. Now, we only have 4 miles of range left now.
Not a lot.
That is an issue.
Not a lot.
But according to the people that briefed us on this vehicle before driving it, if you put it into sport mode, it'll regenerate the power. Is that correct? So
yeah, we should probably talk about that, I guess, is that, a lot of plug-in hybrids, the average plug-in hybrid that owners are going to experience out there, like an X5 plug-in hybrid or a Mercedes plug-in hybrid, outside of the new AMG one that we drove yesterday, they are going to run the battery down, and then after the battery's done, the plug-in hybrid system maybe will give you a little bit more power here and there, but it's not designed the way this one is. This one, if you are in the electric mode, you can commute to the grocery store electric if you want to. If you are in the sport or track modes, it's actually going to start charging the battery, and it's going to really try and aim for a relatively aggressive charge level on the battery, because this plug-in hybrid system is for track use and performance use on the road, etc., where they want to add that extra 90 horsepower all the time.
Yeah, it feels nice driving in this mode. I'm very impressed with how composed it is on the road. It doesn't feel like it's not darty at all. Now, another thing I noticed outside of the steering aspect when I first hopped in the driver's seat is how much engagement the brakes take. So it feels it feels very far down compared to where the gas pedal, or the accelerator pedal in this case, is actually placed. It feels very, very much below where my foot rests on the gas pedal. And it takes quite a bit of engagement. It feels very manual in terms of how much pressure you need to put in to the amount of braking force you get back.
And that is kind of an interesting thing with the McLaren brake pedal on their carbon ceramics here, is that it's not so much a brake travel where you get the braking, it's like brake pressure. It's like, you know, the pedal's not really moving that much, but the braking responds to like how much force are you putting on that pedal. But I do like the engagement. The early carbon ceramic brakes could sometimes feel grabby, they were sometimes squeaky, etc. These brakes haven't squeaked, even though people have been beating on them for actually about 2 weeks up here. Several different drive events have been happening with this car, and they're actually pretty quiet.
Yeah, and like you said, you do have a different brake feel than your standard mass production vehicle, because you are going to be, if you are on the track, you need that firm brake pedal. You don't want that engagement in the first millimeter of press. You need to actually feel the amount of pressure you're putting into that pedal. Now, in an everyday driving situation, it feels a little bit odd, especially if you drive a lot of regular, more consumer vehicles, because when you press the brake pedal on, let's say a Kia, a Ford, whatever it may be, that brake pedal initiates almost immediately. It doesn't matter if you push it with a pound of force or 2 pounds of force, there's an electronic connection and it applies the brakes. This feels like it's just a manual, like old school brakes.
How do you feel about the paddles on the wheel rather than on the column? I like it when they move with the wheel, personally.
I do too, especially for more high performance driving. You don't have a ton of rotation in the wheel in terms of lock to lock, and so your hands are going to be, you're not going to have your arms twisted up, you're not going to be shuffling your hands if you are in a more aggressive driving style. So having those paddles right there at all times is very handy.
Now, I'm told that I'm wrong. So I'm told by pro drivers and, of course, certain companies out there that prefer that column-mounted shifter that no, the real way to do it is column-mounted paddles. So I am surprised that McLaren has gone in this direction, but it is a direction I like because that's my personal preference there.
Yeah, they're nice feeling. They have a really good feel. Titanium or aluminum, whatever they may be, they're full metal. They have a nice feel to them. There's a nice sharp edge to catch your finger, and yeah, I like it. I'm a fan of the steering wheel mounted, so you know what? We're both wrong. So I just shifted over back into sport mode, so now we're back into engine power instead of electric power. And I wanted to test out just to feel how those paddles feel, because I talked about how they feel on the hand. Now, the actual initiation or the function of the paddle itself, there is a distinct click, and it
sounds really good. I like
satisfying. And I think it really helps to have actual metal paddles rather than a plastic.
Let's get the mic closer so you can hear the click. Oh, really cool sound.
Yeah, it is an awesome sound.
And in a way, you know what, sound is what it's all about with this kind of car. It's about the feel, the rawness, the sound, that engine in the back. I actually don't miss the V8 sound. I think that this V6 sounds fantastic. But if you do really love that classic V8 sound, you know, you're gonna have to shop elsewhere, but you also have fewer options than you ever had before.
It is a V6 at the end of the day, so it has 2 turbos muffling the exhaust, and you also have all the covers for the hardtop to sit on top of, all that carbon fiber that sits on top of the engine. So it is going to be a little bit muted inside the cabin. Now, if you have the top down and you're really getting on the throttle, you're going to be able to hear that exhaust a lot more than you do with the top up. So there's kind of a balance, and I think this is a very well composed car for everyday driving supercar. This is not too raw. It feels like you're not going to annoy anybody driving this. You know, people are going to turn their heads because it sounds better than a Toyota Sienna in front of us, but it's not anything too brutal like some V12s, like Aventadors. Those are obnoxious from factory.
That's true.
I mean, a great obnoxious for me at least, but
that brings us to the question, I guess. So if you had, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars just hanging out, are you more of a McLaren-leaning supercar enthusiast, or would you want to go Italian?
You know, I think it's sacrilegious if I go outside of Italian, as I am from that that region. But I do.
Hey, you know, it's been some generations.
It has been a couple generations, so I'm a little removed. But I do have to say, this is a nice vehicle. But I do think at my age currently, if I had millions of dollars right now at 26 years old, I'm going to get something obnoxious. To be honest with you, I'm gonna get something that draws attention, kind of invokes the feelings more so than this does. But if I doubled my age, maybe I'd go for something a little more. I'm not saying you're double my age. I'm just saying if I doubled my age, I'd go for something maybe a little more composed, such as this. And this is a great balance between almost having an economical car and a sports car all packaged into one. Now,
it's sort of like the enthusiasts, lower impact, lower emissions impact option, right?
Yeah, I do love McLaren styling. It's it sets itself apart a lot from other manufacturers, although I do believe that some of the Italian counterparts do have beautiful styles as well. It's really just how you're feeling that day, because all of them are gorgeous. All of them have lots of skill and thought put into the design. But I do think that this is a strikingly gorgeous vehicle. Now, the blue is a little understated. Now, they obviously have different paint options that you can choose for on this car, especially MSO, so you can choose all sorts of different colors.
You want.
Right, exactly. Interior or exterior, you can really customize this to your liking and really jack up that price, too, if you want to. But this blue is a nice understated color. If someone doesn't know what they're looking at, they just think it's I don't know, maybe they'll think it's a Corvette or something. But
that's true. Yeah,
they won't know necessarily.
Corvette's kind of a mid-engine mid-engine supercar, whatever you want to call it, rear-engine, mid-engine. I'll leave that up to you guys. But it's kind of a supercar these days too.
Yeah. If you had millions of dollars, what would you buy? Would you buy a Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren?
That's a tricky one.
A Lotus?
I think I lean McLaren because of the understated styling. I don't think I would Ferrari or Lamborghini somehow. I just think they're just a bit too megaphone. Look at me.
Yeah. Now the counterpart, the competitor for this is going to be the 296 GTB. I don't necessarily love the looks of that compared to this. Now, obviously, if we went more Ferrari, more expensive, different engine options, yes, I'd choose those over this. But comparisons, and then the Lotus Emira, correct, is the twin turbo V6, same displacement. So the Ferrari, this, as well as the Lotus Emira all have very similar powertrains, but I think this is the best looking out of all those.
Yeah. Let us know all what you would buy down there in the comment section below, or would you stay tuned for some of the next generation electric supercars that are actually going to be coming around the corner pretty soon.
Yeah, very soon.
Now let's get down to brass tacks. Exactly what is it going to cost to get you into one of these? Hate to sound like a car dealer, but that's just the long and the short of it. Well, you're going to need at least $300,000 because this is going to start just over $281,000, plus of course tax, title, license, etc., and any options that you might select on your way to choosing the perfect McLaren for you. So you need to have an awful lot of cash, and that means it's a very limited set of buyers that are going to be buying or indeed even interested in buying a McLaren. That sort of makes sense in a way because the average McLaren owner apparently owns not only more than one McLaren, they own more than one supercar. So this is going to be sharing garage space with another kind of supercar, probably a whole host of other vehicles that you're also daily driving. So even though this is one of the more daily driver livable supercars out there, it's most likely not going to be driven even every week necessarily. And that's exactly how we have the combination of features that we have in this model, or why we can have that combination of features. So in a way, although you could obviously commute daily on your electric capability if you have a short commute, you don't have to worry about that because maybe you already have an order in on an electric G-Wagon or something along those lines. That's the kind of customer we're talking about with this. And that's sort of why I don't generally review supercars here on Auto Buyer's Guide. I am more concerned with the kind of cars that you and I can actually afford, the cars that we buy daily. But if you ever have those dreams about what would I get if I, had a rich relative that suddenly died and mysteriously left me with millions and millions of dollars, you know what? A McLaren would absolutely be on my shopping list, and I would put one of these on that shopping list before most of the other supercars. I've always liked the way that McLaren's design language is not as in your face, not as showy as a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, etc., but yet it still looks absolutely insane in just kind of a different way than we find the Italian supercars out there. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section below. And imagining a world where you had $300,000 to $1 million to spend on a sports car, which one would you get? Would you be more interested in something like this, the English interpretation of a lightweight, high-performance vehicle with a lot of modern technology like that plug-in hybrid system designed for high performance, or would you go in more of a traditional route? Let me know what you think. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Find us over at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. We'll see all of you later.